And we welcome back into the program fellow Boston Celtics fan Mike Yuva and a two-time Emmy Award winner in sports journalism, now with Gamecock Central, formerly with Watch Fox in Columbia, where he won those two Emmys. I don't even see those things prominently displayed, Mike. Where
I think
are
they're
they?
right.
Oh, bam! I missed it. If it had been a snake, it would have
They
bit you
blend in.
right in
The
the
back of
ear.
my room's a mess right now because I actually have a cousin that goes to USC, ironically, and my back of my room right now is a dumping ground. She's a freshman, so she left half her stuff before she went back up to Mass, and yeah, so we got a messy back room. But yeah, she comes down here, and then I just found out I have another cousin coming down to South Carolina. He's going to Clemson though, so yeah, they don't that opposite sides of the family though, Keith. But they're all coming down to South Carolina, so I know how many people love more Yankees down in the South.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, at least when I was an undergrad back in the medieval age,
10
it's
years
been
ago.
other than South Carolina and North Carolina, New Jersey and New York, those were next as far as the sheer number of undergraduate students.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those guys lived on my hall. And it was the first time I realized that Jesus had a middle name. So, at any rate, I've said that many times. It doesn't quite pack the punch that it used to. So before we dive into Gamecock Baseball, which did some things that they hadn't done in a while and some things that they've never done in Hoover yesterday, our Boston Celtics looked like finally the team we expected last night. Will the C's be the first team to rally from a 3-0 deficit to make it to the NBA Finals, where they will probably be out of gas and get beat by the Joker and the Denver Nuggets? Shout out Alex English, the last guy to lead the NBA in scoring before some guy they just made a movie about named Jordan, by the way. Legendary Denver Nugget.
I think, and I'm real happy for Alex. Sent a tweet out the other night congratulating him, and it's incredible to think that it's just the first time that the Nuggets are headed to the NBA Finals with all the amazing players that they've had. And certainly he's one of those players towards the top. But look, I don't know if I'm ready to go as far as to say that the Celtics will come back. I did find it very ironic, though, and this is how much of a loser I am. After Game 3, between Game 3 and Game 4, I kid you not, I needed something to lift me up. And I started watching it probably towards the end of Game 3 because it was a shellacking. Plus, I may have had a little skin in the game, so I needed something to take my mind off and make me feel a little better. I started watching 4 Days in October, and I watched that movie 3 times between Game 3 and Game 4. So maybe Joe Missoula, Mr. The Town, he needs to watch 4 Days in October, and just one day at a time, one day. And you kept hearing the Celtics, just don't let us win today. Don't let us win tonight. But I said this to you before, Keith, and I tweeted it out last night. I've seen dumber things. I've seen dumber things happen with Boston sports teams. Dumber things happen within the last 20 years. Of course, you think the Red Sox, right? Which I say ironic because who was in the building last night? Who was in the building in Miami? It was A-Rod and Derek Jeter. And then they show that beautiful, poor Yankee fans. They're just trying to watch a basketball game. They're still catching strikes.
Yes.
A-Rod and Jeter are there, and you see that beautiful picture of the 04 Red Sox. Obviously, the Patriots. Shout out to all you Falcons fans. That Super Bowl 28.
That would include me, by the way.
Oh, never get old. And then the Bruins coming back, as much as they've been friggin' pissing me off this last couple of weeks because of their choke job. They came back down 4-1 in the playoffs back in 2013 against the Leafs when they were down 4-1 in Game 7 with like 10 minutes to go. So I say all that, Keith, to say I've seen dumb things happen with Boston sports teams. I don't know if they have the character to be able to overcome this, but shoot, I'll know. I know this. Boston's going to be rocking. Boston's going to be rocking in Game 5. If they can win that, go back down to Miami, somehow win in Miami, I can't see them losing at home in Game 7. I really can't. But obviously, you got 2 more steps to go. You got to take care of one thing at a time. So, yeah, it's like being in a relationship, and I don't want to, desensitize, abuse or anything like that. So I'll try. We will stay away from that. But it's like someone that just does you wrong. Someone that does you wrong, but you keep going back because they just give you a little bit of hope. So, yeah, maybe they just piss you off or whatever, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to get out of this relationship. But then they give you some flowers or whatever, and you're like, oh God, what a great guy, or great girl.
So my guy Bill Simmons, famous,
featured in that 4 Days in October piece.
Yes, runstheringer.com. Was probably too brutally honest on ESPN, so they got rid of him because he would challenge
the Grantland.
Grantland. Yep. He tweeted last night the Michael Corleone in The Godfather 3, the line where he says, "Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in." The great Al Pacino, of course, and that is it. I mean, to me, that is it. And so I still remember those 4 days in October. And I just don't know if Joe Mazzulla can do it. We talked about it, off air, but honestly, he was put in a bad situation because he was not ready for this job. He was not a quote unquote, what you would call a full-time or top level assistant. Not ever. He sat not even on the bench. Like a lot of people in Boston now are calling him second row Joe. I call him second row clueless Joe because he's just, at least he did call a couple of good timeouts last night to stop runs. And then Marcus Smart would immediately sit down in the coach's seat and talk to the players.
Coach Smart, he's just like Bill Russell. That's what they're going to be saying about Marcus Smart years from now.
But honestly, I think Marcus Smart is the heartbeat of the Celtics, and I think, and Al Horford has done it before as well. I think obviously there's a reason he got that job, but he's not ready. The Celtics roster is built for championships now. And so it's a conundrum on what they're going to do. But I think if they exit in this round, which nobody's ever rallied from down 3-0, I think you have to make a change. You have to get an experienced coach that's prepared to win an NBA championship, because with both Tatum and Brown making all NBA teams, now they have the Supermax carrot to dangle for both of those guys, and nobody's turning that down. Nobody's turning that down because it's just, I think, at least $50 million more over the life of the contract than anybody else can pay. So we'll see.
Can I give you a quick stat, Keith? Because people that might not even be Celtics or basketball fans, I think they always like a nice stat. So this is from Mark Bertrand. He's a radio personality up in Boston, does a great job at 98.5 The Sports Hub. He put this out yesterday. So the Celtics are the 151st NBA team to trail 0-3 in a playoff series. Of the 150 before them, right? So this does not include the Celtics now advancing and forcing a Game 5. And I say advancing, I mean, moving on to another game. 92 teams were swept. All right, well, that's off the list now. 44 lost in Game 5. 11 lost in Game 6. Only 3 teams have reached Game 7, and all 3 of them have lost. So 92 to 44 to 11 to 3. So you see those odds continuing to drop. I'm not a math whiz. I think that's like, I don't know, like just 2% of the teams have reached Game 7. So if you're a gambler or whatever the case may be, or, a math whiz or a non-math whiz, I certainly wasn't. That was why my academic group in college was C's get degrees. But yeah, about 2%. 2% of the teams make it to Game 7, and all 3 of those teams lost. But we'll see. Hey, you know what? I'll say this. If you're a basketball fan, you might hate the Celtics. I get it. You either love them or you hate them. You don't want there to be this, I think it'd be 7 days? 7 days layoff between the end of this series, if it were to end tomorrow, and then the beginning of the NBA Finals. So, if you want some basketball to pay attention to, or maybe just want to watch some Gamecock Baseball and hope that they can make a deep run. But from a basketball standpoint, hopefully they'll find a way, because it's I don't want to see it end this way. I don't want to see it end this way, Keith.
I mean, I don't really think anybody does other than the Heat fans. All right, so we'll see. All right, let's talk about the Gamecocks, because and the people that talk about the Gamecocks, it's just you, me, and Phil Kornblut that are diehard Celtics fans, and his teams are the Celtics, the Yankees, and the Packers. Outside of the Celtics, my teams have always been the Braves and the Falcons.
I want to throw that in there for Phil. I know he's a Duke fan.
I mean, look, after attending Mike Krzyzewski's coaching clinic for about 7 straight years, I was a big Duke fan as well, but mostly because of him. I mean, I got to sit in front of him and Dean Smith year after year after year in October. And just through the process of osmosis, it had to make me a better coach. But I actually did pay attention, and Coach K, he held nothing back. Mm-hmm. In practices, he'd be mic'd up for the clinic when they'd do the practice. Oh yeah, Grant. See, when Grant he stopped practice during a drill because they were in a 4-on-4 shell, and they skipped to the weak side, and Grant Hill was supposed to step over and prevent the dribble drive into the paint, and Krzyzewski just stopped practice. Said, "Oh yeah," he said, "Well, I just want to let you know, when Grant was a freshman and a sophomore, he would have drawn that charge, but now, he's getting ready to be an NBA lottery pick, and it's gone to his head, and so I'm probably just going to call his mom and let her know." And Grant just hung his head, because he knew what was coming. But that was one of the greatest things for me to witness, especially looking back on it. Grant Hill, Thomas Hill, Hurley, Leitner, all those guys, and then the Elton Brand class came in when was freshmen, when those guys were wrapping up their careers. I mean, it was awesome. But anyway, I digress. All right, so my Gamecock Baseball, which has been a hot topic on the message boards because of the slump, because of going, I think 2-10 in your last four, or no, was it 3-9 maybe? Yeah, 3-9 in your last four SEC series, 4-11 in your last 15 with a couple of bad midweek losses at home to North Florida and Charlotte. You know, it's the Fire Kingston, which certainly has to be discussed if the team does not do well down the stretch. But a lot of it's unfair to me because of the number of injuries this team has suffered through. But they've handled it with care because just like any season at South Carolina, it is going to be based on what you do in the postseason. Fair, unfair on Mark Kingston, and right or wrong decision to be very, very cautious with these guys prior to the NCAA tournament.
Well, I mean, look, I feel like where we are right now with this team, you know, we could play this game where you go back to the beginning of the season and you just say, all right, here's the record. Here's where they are. They won their first game in Hoover. Would you take that? And I think a lot of people would say, yeah, absolutely. I think regardless of how things ended this season, in the regular season, that is, injuries, no injuries, whatever the case may be, finishing 4-5-1 in SEC play series, I think none of that really matters in terms of what the goal was going to be from a standard standpoint, which was at least reaching supers in order for Kingston to be retained. I think heading into the season, that was the notion. I still believe that is the notion heading into postseason. And of course, there's obviously one game under their belt in the SEC tournament, and they'll be playing shortly this morning as we tape this. So I say that, Keith, because I think big picture, if they were to do some damage in the SEC tournament to a point where they're able to win it, right? They're able to win the SEC tournament. Does that mean the bar goes down a little bit as to how far they need to make it in the NCAA tournament? I still think it has to be supers. So obviously having success in the SEC tournament, which before yesterday, they hadn't won a game in Hoover since 2018. If they're able to somehow host, that will certainly help their chances to be able to get to a super regional. But I think with this team, it's truly about doing what you can to put yourself in the best position so you can get to a super regional. Because I truly believe at this point, for Mark Kingston, that's what it's going to take. That's what it's going to take in order for him to be back next season.
I mean, I totally agree. That's why I think it is Kingston and staff are doing the right thing by holding these guys. I mean, you're getting, guys back now. Braylon Wimmer, 2 hits yesterday. He's DHing to allow more therapy, more rest on that hamstring, right? And so, but, they are getting back. Will Sanders, they're holding him. It'll probably be, the regional round. But, not only Gamecocks get their first win since 2018 in Hoover, first time ever in 81 SEC tournament games, the Gamecocks get a shutout, and James Hicks, I got to say, masterful yesterday. 6 2/3 innings of shutout ball, 6 strikeouts, only 2 base on balls and 4 hits. And then Cade Austin came in with the bases loaded and got out of it in the 7th. He went the final 2 1/3. and Gamecocks pounded out 12 hits, and it wasn't Ethan Petrie doing the big damage. Gamecocks just slowly but surely, getting it done. Evan Stone, who some people don't think should be starting in center field. Evan Stone, in the second, gets two RBI hit. Dylan Brewer, he gets an RBI. Braswell gets an RBI. Cole Messina walked with the bases loaded. LSU made a pitching change, Georgia made a pitching change with the bases loaded. He walked. And then in the seventh inning, Gamecocks have runners on second and third with 2 outs. Georgia intentionally walks Gavin Cassis to get to freshman Will Tippett. And, usually I think guys, there's a lot of instances where that does pay off, but sometimes guys just get really pissed off. They're like, oh, well, you're walking this guy because you think I'm an easy out. Well, all Will Tippett did was triple to deep right center and cleared the freaking bases. And so courtesy of Colin Taylor, in his last 14 games, I got it here somewhere. Here it is. Will Tippett is hitting 37 at-bats in his last 14 games, almost 300 average, 297, 7 runs, 6 walks, 4 extra base hits, which were 3 home runs, and that triple. I mean, it just seems like some of these younger guys now and guys that have not been in prominent roles all season are starting to come through. I mean, James Hicks had not been a starter. They liked him out of the bullpen. He looks like an NCAA regional starter after that performance yesterday.
No question about it. And look, I think you mentioned the fact that these guys are starting to get healthier than where they have been in quite some time. Are they going to be at 100%? And I'm not even saying about, the nicks, the bruises, the bang up, right? I mean, at this point of the season, everyone's going through something. But as far as this team being as healthy as they have been in a while, the timing could not be coming, or it could not have been coming at a better time for them. So I think, look, you do everything you can, certainly, to be able to make a deep run here. And I say that because I think the SEC tournament, for the most part, is a freaking joke. I think when you're looking at other sports, right, basketball, just because of the way baseball is, it really does a disservice, I feel like. Now, I'm sure if we went down the list of teams that have either made it to the SEC tournament championship or have won the whole thing, I'm sure there's outliers that have had success in the NCAA tournament. But, I mean, you even go back to some of those South Carolina teams, right? 2010, 2011. They didn't win the SEC tournament, right? And they had plenty of success. I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice sometimes when you do go deep because you're not going to have the fresh arms going into the NCAA tournament because it's a quick turnaround. Now, I say all that to say this. South Carolina is in a position where they are fighting. They are fighting for a regional. And I know D1Baseball.com, they're not the committee. They're not the ones that ultimately make the decision. But at the same time, too, they're pretty spot on. They're pretty spot on with a lot of this stuff. And I would say heading into this tournament, I think a lot of people would agree that even if they are that last number seed to be able to host a regional, right? That's 16th. Whether they're there or you believe D1 Baseball, which I do, and they have them as a 2 seed in a different regional, it's too close to leave any room for error. So you have to go out there. You got to do everything you can in Hoover and being able to take care of Georgia in your first game to advance to the double elimination stage now, you need to be able to continue to rack up the wins. You need to do everything you can to make that resume look even better than where it was before heading into this week in Hoover. And if they can do that, Keith, they might be able to slide into that last spot to be able to host a regional. And when you're talking about that, that could be the difference. Home field advantage, that could be the difference as to whether or not we're talking a year from now, in a couple months from now, whether Mark Kingston is back. Because again, I truly believe South Carolina is going to have to make it to a super regional in order for him to be retained by South Carolina.
I agree. So you're not getting Paul Skeens today, Gamecocks. You're getting Thatcher Hurd, 4-2 with a 6.59 ERA. That's their starter. They're in the home whites, Gamecocks, black jerseys, gray pants, black caps. So you got a chance today. All right. Here are some metrics, though. Right now, South Carolina is tied for second with a number of quad one wins with 20. Okay. Their RPI is fifth nationally. And now they have 17 SEC wins, 39 overall wins. The part of the bracket South Carolina is paired with is Arkansas. Well, and it was Tennessee, but Texas A&M upset Tennessee yesterday, 3-0. If South Carolina beats LSU, great. They're in the winners bracket. That gets you 40 wins. That's 21 quad one wins. That's your RPI may go up to 4 because you beat another top 5 opponent. But even if you don't get it today and you get Texas A&M in the losers bracket with Jack Mahoney maybe on the mound, and who knows with the crazy weather, at least the early games you have played, which is good. I think it's good to play the early game instead of sitting around for 12 hours waiting to get your game in like some teams were doing yesterday. That would get you to the magical number of 40 wins, but Mike, that would be 18 SEC wins, 2 in the tournament. I think that boosts the Gamecocks back up, not just to 16, but maybe into the 10, 11, 12, 13 range to where maybe you're getting a 6-11 or a 5-12 rather, which would give you a realistic chance, even if you had to go on the road in the supers. And then we've certainly seen host teams lose in their own regionals. And so I like where the Gamecocks are right now. It was absolutely pivotal to get that win yesterday. It gets you into the double elimination round. So even if you lose, you get another game, you get the opportunity to get that second win in the SEC tournament, which would get you to 40 wins, 18 SEC wins, and probably that'd be 22 quad one wins, which I think with the resume South Carolina built in the early part of the season. I mean, look, what if South Carolina had opened the season with Auburn at home, dropped 2 out of 3, gone on the road and played Kentucky and got swept, and then gone on the road to Arkansas and dropped 2 out of 3, and then came home and swept Georgia and Missouri, then went to Vanderbilt and rocked their number one starter, even though you dropped 2 out of 3 because of kicking the ball around. And then you split with LSU, and then you swept Florida. I mean, the perception of South Carolina is completely different. You know as well as I do, it's not how you start, it's how you finish, because that's what's on everybody's mind. But this has not just been a team that's totally went in the tank. There have been legitimate injuries and, Will Sanders being out. Noah Hall, your number 2 starter, out for the year after 2 SEC series. I mean, South Carolina has been dealing with legitimate issues, but they're still grinding. And I think getting 2 wins in this tournament and impressing people with starting pitching, with timely hitting, I think that will be on the committee's mind.
Yeah, and look, it's not the exact same because it's a different sport, and we're talking college versus pros, but bringing it back to what we were talking about to start off the show, kind of like the Miami Heat, you get hot at the right time, right? You get hot at the right time. That's what they've been able to do. They were able to sneak in with the new expanded playoff format, and they have been red hot. And with the Gamecocks here, you're trying to find a way to be able to sneak into that last spot yourself, right? To be able to host a regional. And if you can get hot at the right time, I think what we've seen from this team throughout the course of the season, they are capable of hitting the ball well. They are capable of pitching well. And when they are on, like they were at the beginning of the year, they can do some dangerous things. Again, we haven't seen it all come together consistently in quite some time, but they've proven that they're capable of doing that. And I know the competition, it got better as the year went on. There's no question about that. But I think we would all agree that if USC is able to find a way to host a regional, those matchups could be a little bit more favorable for the Gamecocks compared to playing the grind that is the SEC. So, again, that's a lot of what ifs. That's a lot of variables that we can't control right now, that they can't control. But all you can really do right now is go out there, try to go as deep as you can in Hoover, and then just pray that some of these other teams that potentially are on that bubble, right, that they stumble. And if they stumble, perhaps you will find yourself in a regional. And, boy, if that is the case, Keith, if that is the case, what a freaking roller coaster it would be to get there. I mean, a month ago, it looked like it was an automatic lock. And then, you go from being the number 3 team in the country to being out of the top 25 this week. I mean, it has been an absolute roller coaster. I mean, there's no other way to put it. But, again, if they're able to find a way, just find a way to get into that final spot or 2 and host a regional, I think we'd all agree that Founders Park would be rocking, and it would certainly help their odds to be able to get back to a super regional. But again, one step at a time. Just try to be as healthy as you can right now to be able to make some damage in postseason play after this week.
No doubt. So I need to correct myself. I think I said McGillis. McGillis, he re-aggravated that arm injury on a check swing or a swing. I meant Talmadge LeCroy. He's back at third. Braswell's been playing short. Tippett at second. Cassis at first. You're going to have a little conundrum when Braylon Wimmer comes back. I mean, I think Braswell's just been too good. Maybe you alternate games with Wimmer and LeCroy as your designated hitter. Because certainly Braswell can go back to third. I don't think they're going to move Tippett out of the lineup. He's just been hitting too well. The defense has been too good. But that's a good problem to have. And then you got your left-handed designated hitter, Carson Hornig, as well, that you can put in there. So I think things are coming together. Jack Mahoney has had his best 2 starts of the season back-to-back weekends in SEC play at Arkansas, 7 innings of shutout ball, 6 or 7 innings of only 1 earned run against Tennessee in that doubleheader, the first game of the doubleheader last Saturday. If you get to Friday, I think you could definitely see Jack Mahoney in that game because you will still have a full week until the regional will begin. Eli Jones, of course, going today for the Gamecocks. So, Will Sanders. I mean, imagine thinking the game. If I told you the Gamecocks are 17-13 and 39-17, and you hadn't really gotten anything outside of the Florida start, and maybe one more out of Will Sanders, and Noah Hall has been out since 2 weeks into the SEC season. Not to mention all the other losses. You'd probably think South Carolina would be fortunate to be sitting at 17-13 and 39-17 overall.
Agreed. So, hey, look, it's a baby step, but to be able to get a win on Tuesday, it at least shows that they have some fight still left in them, right? You're looking for this team to just find a way to get some type of momentum that this week. And again, obviously being able to host a regional, that would be massive. Is it at the end of the world if they don't? No. But I think being able to get momentum more than anything this week would be a step in the right direction, because after what had took place to end the regular season, and fans getting upset, rightfully so, it would be real easy for this team to have gone to Hoover and lose on Tuesday. Would have been real easy. And I don't care that they were playing a Georgia team that they should have beat. There's a bunch of teams that they should have beat towards the end of the season. So for them to be able to get that win yesterday, massive. Again, see what you can do. We're taping this as the game is underway. Their first game, or their second game of the tournament in Hoover. Just do what you can. And continue to pray that you can get as healthy as you can, too. So you can see a guy, like you mentioned, a Mahoney back out there. But we'll see, Keith.
All right, good stuff. So let's switch gears, Mike. So we're almost, back to, I call it the summer of Shane, and that is June and July, because Shane Beamer has owned the summers in recruiting. That's right around the corner right now. As the head ball coach called it, it's talking season right now. I hadn't heard Shane Beamer drop any, can't spell citrus without UT. So I know the Citrus Bowl's happy Peyton Manning's coming back for a senior year, or, Free Shoes University for FSU. But it has been the welcome home tour. Shane Beamer has been going around recently in Florence, obviously talking about the native son, Lenora Sellers, who has turned a lot of heads. And so it is talking season. Lenora Sellers, are you buying the hype?
I'm not ready to say that he's going to be the number 2 quarterback quite yet. I'm not. I think the reality is a lot of people, they're ready to have a party after a couple throws in a spring game, and I think there's still things that he is going to have to improve on in order to get to that spot. Now, let me say this, because as soon as I say anything like that, people all get upset because you're talking about college kids. But I mean, that's one of the biggest issues, I'd say, with Gamecock fans. They don't want to be objective. They want to be, everything's, all happy and go jolly. And as soon as you say anything that comes across remotely negative, you're an asshat. So I say that because what we saw in the spring game, there's a lot of good things. The kid can throw the football. All right. There's been this stereotype on some quarterbacks that can just run. No. This kid can throw it, and he's going to be very, very special. He's going to have to continue to improve with his progressions, which I'm not surprised that it's not fully there yet, because he should have been still in high school at this point. but he arrived on campus early, and being able to get that under his belt, it's going to help him. Now, the reason why I'm talking the way that I am about Sellers is because I think his ceiling is so freaking high. I think it's so high. But my biggest fear, and the reason why I'm talking the way that I am, is because my fear is that people are just going to assume, just get him in there. Just get him in there. And obviously they have a very talented quarterback in Spencer Rattler, and no one is saying, have him go over Rattler. But God forbid, South Carolina hits a little speed bump or whatever the case may be. I've seen it over the last couple of years where this fan base just wants to get that quarterback in there as quickly as possible. And because they're just not fully developed yet, they're not fully ready to go, when adversity hits or whatever, that confidence just goes out the window. That's my biggest fear with Sellers. That's the reason why I'm in zero rush of trying to get him to that number 2 spot. Now, going into camp, he certainly won't be the number 2 guy. He'll probably be towards the bottom of the depth chart naturally because he is a freshman. They'll give the upperclassmen an opportunity. But because of his skill set, can I see South Carolina using him in some type of packages? Certainly. And if you are, then it makes sense to put him in that number 2 spot. I still think Luke Doty will be that guy. I still think Doty will eventually carry that number 2 spot for the majority of the season, if not the entire season, if Sellers can't find that package that we're talking about right now. But I think he's going to get better and better because he has all the intangibles. He can throw and he's just, again, he's smart. But his progressions, that will come naturally. That happens with young quarterbacks. He's only had 15 practices under his belt at the college level, but there's a lot of positive things to say about Sellers, and I think he's going to be a very special quarterback here.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. He's just a different species of guy because he's 6'3", 232, and ran 4.41 laser timed in the spring. He can definitely do damage with his legs, but he is a pass first guy. And here's the thing: is you really don't want Lenore Sellers to be the number 2 guy because he is a true freshman. The great thing is Spencer Rattler and Luke Doty, those are his best friends because those are the guys that are keeping him from having to play as a true freshman and not necessarily being in.
Yep.
You always want to put young players in the best position to succeed. And so don't want to see him in the fourth quarter if South Carolina's up 31-10 against North Carolina. Absolutely. Do I want to see him against Furman and Jacksonville State and probably Vanderbilt at home if that's out of hand late in the game? Absolutely. But do I want to see him in the second quarter in Athens against Georgia or in Knoxville against Tennessee because of an injury? Absolutely not. And so to me, that's the beauty of it. Yes, you do have this, let's face it, the backup quarterback is always the most popular guy with the fans. But hey, probably not this year because you do have that guy named Spencer Rattler who really turned it on at the end of the year and I think has a chance to play himself into being a first or second round pick in the NFL draft because you've got Juice Wells, Trey Knox, Joshua Simon. And Mike, I know you've probably seen the picture, but is it time to stop calling Xavier Legette XL and call him double XL because that dude looks bigger, like he's bigger than Mo Kaba right now. I mean, he is absolutely ripped.
I'll tell you what. You've seen, obviously, that photo that you're talking about with Xavier. I said it going into the spring game because I had a chance to head on over to Bourbon on Main Street. Gamecock Bourbon Society put on an event with Cox by 90 and Garnet Trust. And DeCarrion Joyner was one of the players that swung on by. Joyner does not look like a wide receiver anymore. His body, he is, and it's tough to see sometimes maybe in the stands or if you were watching on TV. This guy's put on some size. And I bring that up because one thing that I think just gets taken for granted, the job that Luke Day has done since arriving at USC has just been absolutely incredible. Incredible. Um, Knock on wood that everyone stays healthy, right? Those soft tissues, all that kind of stuff. But he's done a really good job of keeping guys healthy and on the field the best that you can, right? Injuries are part of the game, but he's really been able to get these guys even bigger. I mean, how many times have we said over the last, I don't know, 6 years or so, 7 years, that South Carolina in certain positions just didn't look like an SEC team. They just didn't have the size at certain positions. That's not the case right now. Are there areas that they can get better at and get bigger at? No question. And they're doing that right now with their offensive line, but and defensive line. But at the same time, too, the guys that are there, I mean, good Lord. I mean, I'll tell you what, if you thought Pup Howard was big coming on campus before, right, and what you saw him in the spring, just wait until you see him this fall. Because a lot of these players are going to start arriving, even a guy like Nicholas Harbor, these guys for the 2023, they're going to start arriving on campus in June, and then they're going to have an opportunity to work with Day. And this is why we always talk about how the strength and conditioning coach is the most important coach outside of the head coach, the most important coach on a football program, in a football program, because he's around these guys more than any other coach. So you watch how big some of these guys are going to get. But yeah, XXL. I like that, Keith.
All right. So you talked about DeCarrion Joyner. Second question for talking season. Is it time now? South Carolina lost out on both Sumo Carnbay and Logan Diggs. Diggs, after a great visit to South Carolina, the allure of LSU was too much. Demi Sumo Carnbay from NC State, he follows his quarterback to Kentucky, and South Carolina was trying to thread the needle with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the NIL and Devin Leary being at NC State and the fact that South Carolina was bringing in Logan Diggs, I think it was too much to overcome. So said all that to say this: is it time to start talking about DeCarrion Joyner as your starting running back? Because he does look like more like a running back now. He is a bigger, thicker athlete who, as my good friend Marty likes to say, he's in his man's body now. He's not a freshman, coming in. He's not high school Harry. He's been in that strength and conditioning program. With the limitations of the position, with a smaller guy like Juju McDowell, who is not going to, be a guy that you can give the rock to 20 times a game or run him between the tackles 10 times per game. Mario Anderson still making the move from Division II. Is it time to start talking about the
Yes, I think it is. Do, 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 do.
Hang on. All right, now we're back. I don't know what happened. There was a StreamYard glitch. And so to ask the question, is it time to start talking about Dakereon Joyner as your starting running back?
Absolutely. And I know that there's going to be some fans out there that aren't going to be thrilled about that. Not that they don't like DK, because I think DK might be one of the most beloved Gamecocks that has come through this program in quite some time. But I think, again, two things. One, with where the game is at right now, you don't need a running back. And that's not to say DK won't have games like this if he is number one running back. But you don't need running backs to be running the ball 25 plus times in a game. Okay. This isn't the George Roger era. This isn't the Herschel Walker era. There's always going to be running backs that will be outliers that will do that in college football. But if you go across the board, the game is not like that. I mean, talking about even Logan Diggs. I mean, here's a guy that had plenty of action last year at Notre Dame, right? We were talking so much about possibly him coming to South Carolina, and he split the workload at ND. You don't need to have a guy that's getting a bunch of carries. So that's number one. Number two, because of his ability, as Montario Hardesty pointed out, his ability on punt as a blocker, there's a lot of crossover, and they use a lot of the same terminology too, which is going to allow DK to be able to pick up the position even quicker. That he has the ability to make an impact as a blocker at running back, which when you look at the guys that they have there, right, in that room, I would say Mario Anderson. Juju has got better with his blocking, according to people that are close with the program. But Mario, coming from a Division II school, he needs to get more reps out there before, in my opinion, that you can trust him in those situations. So I bring that part of it up because, we're talking with Marcus Lattimore in the past. He said the easiest way to stay in the field is to prove that you can block at that running back position. And who are you going to have the most confidence with, right? Dontavius Braswell, he's a freshman that's coming in here. That's not to say that he can't earn that trust, but he's a freshman. Juju McDowell doesn't have that same type of size, even though he's been getting better with it. When you talk to people in the program, I feel like because of his ability to block, and if he can be consistent in training camp, I think that will ultimately lead Dakereon Joyner to be your starting running back this season. And I think his ability to pick up the position as quickly as he has this spring, and what he showed in the spring game and what he did in the scrimmages that were closed off to the public, there's a lot of positives. A lot of positives with DK. And again, is this the best situation that you could be in? Certainly not. But I don't think it's as bad as some people think it is. And ultimately, regardless, and I said this before, whether Diggs was your running back, whether DK is your running back, whether it's Mario Anderson, Juju, whatever, it's all going to come down to the offensive line. And obviously the O-line right now, they're going to have to play some musical chairs probably with Nichols being out for an extended period of time. But if South Carolina can figure that out, I think that will be something that will take care of itself, the running back room.
No doubt. So let's talk about DJ Braswell and Nicholas Harbor, because those are two of the rest of that freshman class that will come in. I think the team actually convenes on Memorial Day. That is the first team meeting, so that will be Monday night. Summer workouts will begin. Shane Beamer has said now the NCAA has loosened it up for coaches to be able to work with their players more on football things, just like basketball did several years ago. Allowed, there to be up to, I believe, 6 or 7 players in a workout at one time, to where you could do individual skill development and, 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3 offense, defensive concepts. Now football coaches can do more with their freshmen, and as it will be important for them in the strength program, Nicholas Harbor, I mean, when you see this guy run, 10.2 whatever in the 100 meters at 6'5" or 6'6", 240 pounds. And then, DJ Braswell, 6 foot 210, 10.700 meters, which is really moving. I mean, it's not world-class speed, but a guy over 200 pounds that runs 10.7 or less, that's kind of elite speed for that position. I think because of that, he will have an opportunity. Now, like you said, and like Marcus Lattimore said, and it's true, the key is blitz pickup, pass protection for running backs. Those are the things that is the most difficult for freshmen to learn. But now with this new window in the summertime, for a guy like Braswell to pick up on a lot of that, and for Nicholas Harbor, for Justin Stepp to get to work with him, and Jody Wright for that matter, and Dowell Loggins, whatever, I think those are really two of the biggest pieces coming in this summer for South Carolina's offense. Agree, disagree?
I agree. And as we have discovered and have learned over the last couple weeks, and I think Beamer actually went on record to even say it, finally, publicly, that the plan right now for Nicholas Harbor will not be tight end, but it will be putting him at wide receiver, which was one of the worst kept secrets in South Carolina for a while. But I bring that up because two things. With how deep South Carolina's tight end room is, it makes sense to find ways to get Harbor on the field as quickly as possible. The second part of it is, and it's not saying that these two players are the same, and certainly with Harbor's background of how smart he is, comes from a family, doctors and NASA. I mean, it's incredible, right? I bring this up because you make this easy for him. Just play wide receiver. You play tight end. In a sense, it's kind of like learning two positions because you got to pick up all the blocking assignments and you got to pick up, obviously, the route concepts. So it wasn't the exact same, but I think of like the E.J. Jenkins situation when Jenkins was here. He was a wide receiver, and they tried to move him over to tight end. And I truly believe because of having to learn a position that he hadn't played before, tight end, that a lot of the extra things that you have to pick up playing that tight end position, I think it kind of just put his brain in overload. And he wasn't able to go out there and play to a level where they felt comfortable enough to put him out there as much. And I think that's why some fans are like, why don't you see him out there? He's almost 7 feet tall. Just throw it to him. So I say that because with Harbor, again, very smart kid, but make it as easy for him as possible. Just have him play wide receiver, let him go. As far as Braswell is concerned, and you mentioned it, ran a 10.7 on the 100 meter. He's a state champion in the state of Georgia in the 100 meter and the 200 meter. So you have a guy that's coming in here that has some speed. He's a guy that is just a hair under 6 feet tall. I feel like he can be a quicker version of what we saw with Kevin Harris as his career plays out. I think that's what he can do for you. And again, not the best situation right now that South Carolina has, at least from an experience standpoint in that running back room. But, and I've said this before, I still think South Carolina is 2 years away from really doing some serious damage in the SEC and being able to have the situation that you have where Braswell might be asked to do a little bit more because of the lack of experience in that running back room. When we look back 2 years from now, we might be saying, man, the opportunities that Braswell got as a freshman, wow, that really is making the difference right now. He 2 years from now could be the starting running back in that room. And that could be the difference on a team that will have a lot of young talent right now that will be experienced 2 years from now, especially if they're able to stay together.
No doubt about it. All right, Mike, final question before I let you go. So, I mean, there's a lot of people we could talk about for Gamecock football, right? Like, even though he's a transfer, or even two of them, Trey Knox and Joshua Simon. Certainly on offense, any discussion begins with Spencer Rattler and Juice Wells, right? Defensively, to me, it's Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Huntley, Nick Emanwari, and DQ Smith, right? Those guys, everybody's talking about them. All right, but if I were to ask you to give me 2 or 3 kind of under the radar guys on offense and maybe the same for defense, who would be some of the less talked about guys that you think could really be impact players for the Gamecocks this season?
Well, starting with the defensive side, right? I mean, there's going to be guys, of course, that we're going to talk about like Marcellus Dial and O'Donnell Fortune. I think those 2 guys in particular are going to have some great years. And, people are excited to see Pup Howard. I really think from a defensive standpoint, one player that really just, I think, is flying under the radar because he is a freshman, but because of the lack of depth and the unknowns when you're talking about a Terrell Dawkins and Jordan Strawn as far as what they will look like coming back from injury, I think a player that could really make an impact this year is Umi Ozulu. I think he is a guy that demonstrated a lot of good things in the spring. Is he a guy that's going to go out there and set all these records as a freshman? No. But I think if called upon, if needed, he's going to go out there, and I think he's really going to show like, man, this kid does not look like a freshman. I mean, he's long in length with his arms, big guy, quick, everything that we've heard from Sterling Lucas on just how he's been able to develop. I think that should excite you. I think Stone Blanton, obviously a guy that's returning, that saw more time defensively as the season went on last year, did great things on special teams. I think that is a guy who's going to have a big season for South Carolina. And when we're looking at, again, we're talking about 2 years from now, he's going to be a big, big part of why South Carolina will have success. But this season as a sophomore, he's going to have an opportunity to see a lot of playing time. And I think he's really going to rise to the occasion. And then again, you mentioned Pup Howard. I think Pup is going to be in a situation to make some plays happen. I don't think he's necessarily going to fly under the radar because I think a lot of people are expecting him to do big things. So I'll use that final one on DQ Smith. I think when we're talking about the secondary for South Carolina, again, I mentioned O'Donnell Fortune. I mentioned Marcellus Dial. Those guys are getting national attention in some of the previews that we're seeing across the country. And naturally, Nick Emanwari is going to get attention. But I think DQ Smith is really flying under the radar. And I think what he was able to accomplish as a freshman last year was taken for granted in a sense. His knowledge, his ability to pick up information quickly, it stems back to him being a quarterback at Spring Valley. He's able to recognize route concepts in a way that few defensive backs can, especially young defensive backs, because he was a quarterback. So, look, I know there's a lot of people that are excited to see Nick Emanwari heading into his sophomore year, and I think Nick will have a great year. But I really think when we sit back and we look back at the season that was, I think DQ Smith is going to have the best season in that South Carolina secondary because he really was just coming into his own. I think he's going to have a big, big year. So pay attention to DQ Smith.
All right, how about on offense?
Ooh, offensively, it's not the sexiest position. I've been a big fan of his since he arrived. And I think especially with knowing that Jalen Nichols will be out for an extended period of time, I've been calling him kind of like a utility player in baseball, and that's Nick Gargiulo. I think Gargiulo is a guy that, again, it's not the sexy choice. It's not your wide receiver or this or that, but he is a guy that you could plug in anywhere on the offensive line, center, guard, tackle. And I get it. He's coming from Yale. But at the same time, too, you talk to people who, and I've had my coach who coaches at Holy Cross now, he had a game plan against this guy. He said this guy had no business being there at Yale. He is a Power 5 player. And I think he is someone, when you're talking about value, if they have to move him out to tackle, it's one of those things that just get overlooked. It's like, all right, just plug someone on the offensive line. If South Carolina is able to have success quickly on the offensive line, Gargiulo is going to be a big part of that. As far as other players to keep an eye on offensively, I think Marion Brown is going to have a big year. I think Brown is a guy that, look, Juice Wells, he's going to be getting a lot of the attention, but I think he's not going to surprise teams this year. And if they're going to double team him, right, or maybe use a high safety over the top, it's going to open up some of these other wide receivers, some of these other tight ends as well. And I think Brown is going to be one of those guys that's going to have opportunities to see the ball come his way. And if it's not Brown, Eddie Lewis was someone that grabbed my attention in the spring. I think he's a guy that can make an impact, obviously, on special teams. He did some great things at Memphis from a special teams standpoint, but because of that speed, and we've seen the arm for Spencer. How many times early in the season last year was Spencer Rattler and his wide receivers, they were just off by a hair, right? I mean, there were so many opportunities that there could have been home run plays. And that comes naturally when you have a new quarterback working with new wide receivers. Well, I think Spencer having the ability to work with Eddie Lewis and some of these other guys and understanding what he has in front of him from an offensive line standpoint, I think Eddie Lewis, with that speed, if he's able to get behind the secondary, I think we could see a couple home runs from Rattler to Lewis this year. So that's a guy that I'm excited to see. I think South Carolina's depth at wide receiver right now, it is night and day different in comparison to, say, the end of the Muschamp era when they had talent at wide receiver, right? But it was just Shi Smith, and that was it in terms of just the development at the time. They didn't have – basketball analogy, Keith, right? Like a little kid, like a 10-year-old. You take away his right hand, he had no left. That was South Carolina. You took care of Shi Smith, South Carolina, when they had to throw the football because, of course, they ran the ball so well, and it all started with Kevin Harris and that offensive line. But you took Shi Smith away when you needed to go through the air. You had no one to go to because at that point in time, you just didn't have the same type of depth, proven depth, as I like to call it. And I think with South Carolina, they have the talent at wide receiver. Juice Wells, he will get all the attention. Trey Knox even. Pay attention to Brown and Lewis. I'm telling you, I think this is going to be a big year for both those guys.
All right, there it is, Mike Yuva. Mike, I can't thank you enough for being with us today and always being so gracious with your time. What you got coming up on GamecockCentral.com?
Well, we've been doing interviews with some of these commits over the last couple of weeks, and I dropped a really good one yesterday. And I say good one, I had nothing to do with it. Blake Franks, he had the good stuff to talk about. What I really like about talking with these commits, they all have that same mentality, which is, hey, we're committed to South Carolina. I'm not just worried about, throwing on a Gamecock hat or sweatshirt. I'm in recruiting mode now. And he talked about how he's coming out of his comfort zone a little bit to be able to help USC through that. And really special kid. So that went up yesterday. We'll have breakdown of, where South Carolina is standing right now with their offensive line over the next couple years just because of the decommitment from Mike Williams and why you should be okay still. And that's what we have going. And I'm praying that the Celtics can force a Game 6 because I'm heading back to Boston this weekend to see the grandfather and the family, and I'm hoping they will be a Game 6 so that I could pop in with the girlfriend to a Boston dive bar, give her the experience of what it's like to watch a big Boston playoff game up north. But again, got to win Game 5.
No doubt. Well, Mike, have a fantastic weekend, safe travels, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Appreciate it, Keith.
All right, that was Mike Yuva, two-time Emmy Award winner from GamecockCentral.com. I'll be back right after this commercial message.